Fair to say you simply flooded the system with money?
Yes, we did. That's another way to think about it. We did.
Where does it come from? Do you just print it?
We print it digitally. So we, as a central bank, we have the ability to create money digitally, and we do that by buying treasury bills or bonds or other government-guaranteed securities, and that actually increases the money supply. We also print actual currency, and we distribute that through the Federal Reserve banks.
Is that tax money that the Fed is spending?
It's not tax money. The banks have accounts with the Fed much the same way that you have an account in a commercial bank. So to lend to a bank, we simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account that they have with the Fed. So it's much more akin, although not exactly the same, but it's much more akin to printing money than it is to borrowing.
To the person who is about to grab their car keys and go to the ATM and take out $3,000, you say what?
You don't need to. Your ATM is safe, your banks are safe, there's enough cash in the financial system, and there is an infinite amount of cash at the Federal Reserve. We will do whatever we need to do to make sure that there's enough cash in the banking system.
Are U.S. Treasury bonds still safe to invest in?
Very much so. I think this is not an issue of credit rating. The United States can pay any debt it has because we can always print money to do that. So there is zero probability of default.
Can you give me an example that would justify the lack of transparency?
Well, we don't have a lack of transparency.
You do. If you can't audit it, that's a lack of transparency.
So I regard the Federal Reserve as one of the most transparent central banks in the world.
That's a statement. What do you fear about the audit? Give me a real-time example.
So I think the FOMC needs a space in which it can have honest conversations and deliberate in real time about the decisions that we make without having political influence brought to bear in second-guessing decisions that we have made and opining on them, possibly with the idea of reversing them.
We can discuss things in public that are sensitive, talk about national security. The Supreme Court does the same thing. Just give me one example how it could hurt the Fed being transparent.
Because what you're talking about with the GAO are policy reviews.
Give me an example, not a general swipe of review. Just say, take, for example, this. If somebody said this, it would be horrible. It would be end of the world for the Fed. Give me an example like that.
So I would envision a situation where the GAO, at the request of members of Congress, might come in and say, at our meeting a week ago, they've taken the transcripts and reviewed what we said. They believe that the decision we made was the wrong one at that particular meeting. And I would say that's an extreme interference and politicization of our ability to make independent monetary policy decisions.
So you're telling me we shouldn't be transparent for the fear of being second-guessed or somebody criticizing you because they thought you were wrong. Do I get it?
What we're talking about is political interference in decision-making by the committee.
I don't see that. If it's after the fact, I don't see the interference in decision-making.
Well, I do, so I...
Well, give me an example.
I gave you an example.
Just give me one example of why they shouldn't have that.
Again, where will the money come from? This is our problem in this country. We're bankrupt, too. And also, along this line, do you feel like, you go along with this commitment, what are we going to do when a state gets under the gun, like California and others? I mean, they're approaching the state that Greece is in. I mean, we can't turn down California. I mean, if we can bail out all these banks and they get off the hook, and now they're making billions and their executive officers are cleaning up, do you think we would ever turn down California or any other state that gets in the same situation?
Well, that's Congress's decision.
Well, you bailed out a lot of people from the IMF. You have the capability of buying up some debt and doing all these kinds of things. We can't even audit you to find out what you do. So you can do anything you want. You can create as much money as you want. So
you can see any transaction or loan we make, we're happy to provide that information to you. And we're not involved with lending to the IMF. The IMF is a separate institution which has American executives, part of the executive.
But where would the money come from?
It would come. It's a loan, but it would come from the U.S. government.
Eventually, we would create out of thin air.
Well, it's a loan.
Because we don't have
if
any
it's not paid back, then we would take our share of the loss.
I yield back.
You think we'll be talking about Bitcoin in 10 years from now?
I won't be talking about Bitcoin in 10 years, I can assure you that.
But you might be in at least 6 years as Treasury Secretary, as you just said.
Exactly. I would bet even in 5 or 6 years, I'm no longer talking about Bitcoin as Treasury Secretary. I'll have other priorities.
You'll be loaded up on Bitcoin and a gazillionaire.
I can assure you I will personally not be loaded up on Bitcoin.
Okay. Never say never.
In 2008, a person or group of people using the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto proposed a decentralized peer-to-peer system for making and processing payments. A key challenge in digital payments is to prevent the same assets from being spent twice. The Bitcoin white paper proposed a novel method for validating transactions using cryptography that addressed the so-called double spend problem. This and other innovations related to distributed ledger technology are the foundation for blockchain-based digital assets.
In fact, it's waning in terms of our currency. And I'm not just talking about the value of our currency. I'm talking about our currency being used throughout the world.
You want it to remain. You want the dollar to remain the world's reserve currency.
Well, I think it's bigger than losing any war. I think if it doesn't, look, we are already reverting to third world status in many ways. You look at our airports, you look at our terminals, you look at our filthy roads and broken roads and everything else. We're like a third world country. We have something that's very powerful, and that's our dollar all over. But you take a look at what's happening to it now with other countries not using it. And you know China wants to replace it with the yuan. And it was unthinkable with us. Unthinkable. Would never have happened. Now people are thinking about it. That could happen.
Madam Speaker, today marks the 15th anniversary of Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper that gave birth to the Bitcoin network, a fully decentralized peer-to-peer and permissionless way to exchange value. In the words of Twitter founder Jack Dorsey, the Bitcoin white paper is one of the most seminal works of computer science in the last 30 years. It's poetry. In the words of SEC Chairman Gary Gensler, Satoshi's innovation potential to spur change is worth pursuing to lower economic rents and to promote economic inclusion. I couldn't agree more. In fact, over the last decade, we've seen Bitcoin empower the underbanked as well as those living in oppressive regimes. Women, for instance, who use Bitcoin all over the world to evade unjust restrictions on their financial freedoms. It's also helped thousands of families avoid the tragedy of currency debasement. Now, in full disclosure, Madam Speaker, while I do own Bitcoin, I'm not advocating for anyone to buy it, but for everyone to study it, progressives in particular, because after all, Bitcoin was born in the midst of the great financial crisis as an alternative to big banks' greed and the system that never failed to bail them out. It stands for a truly progressive ideal. So today, Madam Speaker, let me thank Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever that may be, and wish a happy 15th anniversary to Bitcoin's white paper. Thank you, Madam Speaker.